Today, I have the pleasure of introducing one of my best friends. I met Sister Carol Rittner in the 80s when she was about to launch a conference in Washington on rescuers of Jews during the Holocaust. I joined up with her to help make that happen. Her good luck, her noble ideas, her excellent contacts, and relentless will led to holding the conference at the State Department with the evening program the night before at the Kennedy Center. The conference led to producing a half-hour documentary film called The Courage to Care that was nominated for an Academy Award. Elie Wiesel was her guide. I also joined Sister Carol, on a peacemaking project in Northern Ireland. John Hume was our guide. Sister Carol has lectured on the Holocaust around the world and has written and edited numerous books on the Holocaust and other genocides. The most recent, published this year, is Advancing Holocaust Studies. Dr. Rittner is a recipient of 4 honorary degrees and numerous awards from civic and scholarly organizations. Today, she will be talking about the Holocaust and Jewish-Christian relations. Sister?
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. Actually, you and I met in the 1970s.
Oh.
And I came up and you helped me with an art exhibition at Misericordia that an Israeli artist mounted. So we've been friends for a long time. And so thanks very much for the invitation. And Allison, thank you for all that you did to make the Schemel Forum and my speaking here possible today. You know, I love the aim of the Schemel Forum, which is to provide an opportunity for people of all ages to explore the intellectual and cultural wonders of the world. Now, I have to say, following Fintan O'Toole, who was the speaker on October the 15th, is a bit daunting, but I'll do my best. He spoke about our troubled American system of government, about democracy, and about whether or not the promise America held for the world can be restored. I want to speak about the troubled relationship between Jews and Christians over the centuries, and whether or not that relationship has improved at all during the 76 years since the end of World War II and the Holocaust. I am a Roman Catholic nun, a member of the Religious Sisters of Mercy. Some of you will remember us from Mercy Hospital there on Jefferson Avenue. I entered the convent, as we used to say, on the cusp of an event that would revolutionize the Catholic Church and have a significant impact on other Christian churches as well. I'm speaking about Vatican II, convened by Pope John the 23rd in January 1959, 14 years after the end of the war and the Holocaust. I don't think I'm exaggerating one bit when I say that few institutions were as closed in on itself as was the Catholic Church prior to Vatican II. We Catholics, from the Pope on down to the humblest person in the pews, used to assert, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside the church, there is no salvation. Such an idea and attitude was preached and taught through the centuries to the Catholic faithful, and it could not help but have an effect, helping to enable Catholics to become insensitive to others, even making them immune to their own destructive behaviors toward others. Vatican II encouraged the Catholic Church to be more outward-looking, its faithful to be more respectful toward others who are not baptized members of the Catholic Church. In the midst of the Second World War, Adolf Hitler, leader of the German people, conducted a systematic campaign to exterminate European Jewry. This genocidal campaign was directed at all Jews on the basis of what was assumed to be a shared racial nature. It did not matter if the Jew was male or female. infant or elderly, culturally assimilated or set apart by a traditional Jewish way of life. It didn't matter whether they were secular or religious. Even if the Jew was a convert to Christianity, did not finally matter. For Nazi ideology, a Jew was a Jew was a Jew. All belonged to one racial nature, which Nazism regarded as impure and destructive to the national purity of the so-called Aryan race. This systematic campaign to exterminate European Jewry, and nearly 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, happened in the heartland of Christian Europe. The Holocaust was not just an unfortunate event in human history, unrelated to the religious, moral, intellectual, and cultural conditions of Western civilization. The Holocaust cannot be reduced to a monstrous criminal act, then forgotten. In remembering the Holocaust, we Christians must ask ourselves how it could have happened in the 20th century, in the epicenter of Christian Europe. We also need to ask ourselves why compassion, indignation, indeed active Christian resistance to the Nazis could be found only in exceptional instances when it came to the Jews. While there is no simple explanation for these questions, one way of approaching them is to do so from the perspective of sociology and its important insight that thought is socially grounded, that society affects our consciousness, affects the way we perceive reality and think about it. Even religion, however spiritual in appearance, has a social impact that often is hidden from its adherents, including its clergy and theologians. The hatred and persecution of the Jews in Hitler's Germany, leading to the extermination camps in the East, were a terrifying racial pagan phenomenon which had nothing directly to do with religion. But I would argue it would not have been possible if hostility to the Jews had not been fostered by Christian teaching and preaching, which spoke of the Jews and Judaism almost from the beginnings of Christianity, only in terms of rejection. Some scholars say this happened as a result of the need of the emerging Christian community to justify a messianic reading of the scriptures. Through the centuries, even down to our own, Christian teachers and preachers, Catholic and Protestant alike, accompanied the proclamation of the gospel with the refutation of Judaism and the negation of the Jewish existence before God. For centuries, they argued that the Jewish people never understood the prophetic message, that they lived in blindness and infidelity, that they rejected Jesus as the Messiah because they were hard-hearted and stubborn, and that they condemned Jesus to death. In the Christian worldview, Jews were people excluded from grace, reprobated and condemned, preserved in history only as a sign of God's wrath. The negation of Jewish existence was translated into social and political terms when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in 321 of the Common Era. For more than 1,500 years, the leaders of Christian churches, popes and bishops, pastors and leaders of the Christian Reformed tradition, like Martin Luther, as well as ordinary Christians, with few exceptions, disparaged Jews and Judaism in their teaching and preaching. This teaching of contempt toward Jews and Judaism was not something just done by Christian church leaders, however. Good Christians, monarchs, and ordinary people alike reinforced this teaching of contempt by pushing Jews out of cities, towns, and villages during the Middle Ages and after, condemning Jews to the margins of society in so-called Christian Europe, excluding them from guilds, universities, and professions, even excluding them from what today we refer to as the universe of moral obligation. That is the circle in which people honor reciprocal obligations to protect each other. The negation of Jewish existence, which the Christian churches symbolized in their liturgy and doctrines, their sermons and teaching materials, helped to produce an endless series of persecutions and pogroms. Monarchs and secular rulers incorporated these symbols in laws and social structures that in turn fueled hatred of Jews by Christians who often were unaware of what had become a kind of compulsive hatred of Jews and Judaism. By the 19th century, European society, particularly Western European society, had become more secular, less religious. As a result, so did prejudice against Jews. Anti-Semitism, a term popularized by the German journalist and racist ideologue Wilhelm Marr in the 1870s, became the favored concept. Marr wanted to de-emphasize the religious connotation of anti-Jewish prejudice and focus more on racial ones. The term anti-Semitism caught on and eventually became a way of speaking about all forms of hostility directed at and experienced by Jews throughout history. Anti-Semitism ranges from quiet contempt to bullying, persecution, and racist violence directed against the Jewish people. Its distinguishing mark is hatred or contempt for Jews. It goes beyond what one might call normal political conflict, beyond even normal hostilities and prejudices that arise between different peoples. Anti-Semitic attributes to Jews have a quality of cosmic and diabolic evil about it. The Nazis used racist anti-Semitism, bolstered by theological anti-Judaism, to justify the legal discrimination and persecution of Jews in Germany in the 1930s, the arrest and deportation of Jews from throughout German-occupied Europe to concentration and death camps in the 1940s, and the use of modern industrial methods to murder Jews in the very heart of Christian Europe during the war and the Holocaust. Many contemporary historians and theologians, Christians as well as Jews, argue that Christian anti-Judaism contributed directly to the Holocaust. The churches, Catholic and Protestant alike, in my view, bear a substantial responsibility for the tragic history of the Jews in Christendom, which was the foundation upon which the political anti-Semitism and the Nazi use of it was erected. Only with the defeat of Nazi Germany in May 1945 were the Nazi concentration and death camps finally closed down, even if the underlying ideologies that helped to sustain them continued to linger in the Christian churches and civil society after the end of World War II and the Holocaust. In October 1958, Cardinal Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli was elected Supreme Pontiff, that is, Pope of the Roman Catholic Church and sovereign of Vatican City. He took the name John, becoming Pope John the 23rd. Angelo Roncalli served as Pope from October 1958 until his death in June 1963. He had been apostolic delegate to Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey during the 1930s and into the 1940s. In 1944, he was appointed apostolic nuncio to liberated France. Roncalli was well aware of the Holocaust. He lived through it. He did his best from his position in Turkey to help Jews and others get out of occupied Europe to safe havens. He was fully cognizant of the many failures of the institutional Catholic Church during the Holocaust. On January 25th, 1959, Pope John XXIII unexpectedly announced he intended to convene an ecumenical council. It would become known as Vatican Council II. I entered the convent as a 19-year-old on September 8th, 1962. 5 weeks later, October 11th, 1962, the first session of Vatican II was called to order by Pope John XXIII. 2 years earlier, June 13th, 1960, Pope John XXIII met in the Vatican with Jules Isaac, a French Jewish scholar who lost his wife and daughter and other members of his family during the Holocaust. Isaac survived only because he was not at home when the Germans came calling. He went into hiding, and he survived because French Catholics hid him. What Isaac could not understand, either during the war or after, was why the Nazis and their collaborators targeted and killed people simply because they were Jews. From where, he wondered, did this murderous anti-Semitism spring? What was its origin? Why didn't the Pope in Rome at the time, Pius XII, speak up and condemn the Nazis? He began to do research, even while he was still in hiding from the Nazis, working with borrowed books supplied by friends, including a few Catholic priests. Isaac set out to document his intuition that anti-Semitism, more precisely anti-Judaism, was a doctrine of contempt founded upon and elaborated from false and mendacious readings of the Christian scriptures. On that Wednesday in June 1960, when he met with John XXIII, Jules Isaac had his research findings ready for the Pope. He outlined the centuries of Christian teaching of contempt about Jews and Judaism. Toward the end of their meeting, the old Jewish scholar asked the old Pope whether there was any hope of ridding Christian teaching of the anti-Jewish teachings that had been encrusted on it like barnacles on a ship. Pope John XXIII replied with characteristic honesty, "You have every right to more than hope that the church will do something about that." And thus began work in the Catholic Church that continues even up to our own day. The 4 sessions of Vatican II lasted from October 1962 until December 1965. No one expected that better relations between Jews and Catholics would be one of the major achievements of Vatican II, and yet it was. One of the documents of Vatican II was Nostra Aetate, literally, in our time. It addresses the relationship of the Catholic Church to non-Christian religions. What does Nostra Aetate have to say about Judaism? Well, first of all, it repudiates the longstanding charge of deicide, that the Jews killed Jesus. It deplores all hatreds, persecutions, displays of anti-Semitism directed at the Jews at any time or from any source. It stresses the need for accurate biblical interpretation and religious education so that negative views of Jews and Judaism are not presented as biblically based or as authentic Christian Catholic teaching. It expresses no interest in further efforts to baptize Jews, although it does not explicitly exclude evangelizing Jews. It relegates the resolution of the Jewish and Christian disagreement over Jesus and Jesus's significance to the end of history. Nostra Aetate is not a perfect document, but then what document is? But in 1965, when it was overwhelmingly approved by the bishops, archbishops, and cardinals at Vatican II, it was a revolutionary document. Nostra Aetate effectively reversed centuries of the teaching of contempt for Jews and Judaism. And Nostra Aetate came with the teaching authority of the Catholic Church, which in size and influence is unparalleled in the Christian world. Pope Paul VI promulgated Nostra Aetate on October 28, 1965. 2 days, really. In two more days, it will be 56 years since Nostra Aetate was promulgated. Nostra Aetate did not say the last word or even the only word on Jews and Judaism. Still, even after passing Nostra Aetate, even after the Vatican issued subsequent documents about Jewish-Christian relations, I'm thinking about documents such as guidelines and suggestions for implementing the conciliar document Nostra Aetate, or another document, notes on the correct way to present Jews and Judaism in preaching and teaching and catechesis in the Roman Catholic Church, or another document, the Jewish people and their sacred scriptures in the Christian Bible. This is just to name very few of the many documents that have since been issued. Even after rewriting Catholic religion textbooks, even after changing Holy Week prayers that for nearly 2 millennia had cast Jews and Judaism in a negative light, even after trying to educate Catholic seminarians, priests, nuns, and lay people in a more positive way about Jews and living Judaism, there still remains work to be done in the Catholic Church and among the faithful. And no pope has done more to advance the work of Jewish-Catholic relations after Vatican II than Karol Wojtyła, the Polish priest, bishop, Cardinal Archbishop, who in 1978 became Pope, taking the name John Paul II. He moved boldly, opening new avenues of discussion and dialogue with Jews in Rome, Israel, and throughout the world. As Pope, John Paul II visited the site of Auschwitz and Birkenau. No pope had ever done that before. He visited synagogues around the world, including one down the street and across the river from where he lived in the Vatican. That had never happened before. And as early as 1980, John Paul II stressed that the covenant with the Jews has never been revoked by God. When he visited his Jewish neighbors at the Rome synagogue in 1986, he hailed Jews as our elder brothers. In 1998, the Vatican published a document entitled We Remember, a reflection on the Shoah, reflection on the Holocaust. It had taken 11 years to prepare that text, and Jewish reaction to it was generally reserved. The document We Remember was more circumspect than documents about the Holocaust issued by the German bishops in 1988 and 1995, more circumspect than documents issued by the bishops of France, for example, in 1997. Both the French and the German bishops explicitly recognized that anti-Judaism had been endemic in the Catholic churches, providing the soil that, in the French bishop's words, nurtured the poisonous plant of contempt for Jews. The French bishops confessed that the teaching of contempt about Jews and Judaism had been widespread among their people, and it helped to encourage hostility and indifference among Catholics of France to the sufferings of the Jews during the Holocaust. The Vatican's 1998 document, We Remember, by contrast, distinguished between the behavior of the church as such, a rather abstract concept, and the behavior of the church's sons and daughters. And most amazingly, the Vatican document did not give any hint that a controversy was raging over the wartime record of Pope Pius XII with respect to the Holocaust, even as his cause for sainthood was going forward in the Vatican. At the beginning of the new millennium, in March 2000, on behalf of the whole church and with its full authority, John Paul II officiated at a remarkable ceremony of repentance, televised to the world from St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Among the sins for which John Paul II asked pardon from God were offenses against the Jewish people. Days afterward, he was in Israel, where he visited Yad Vashem, met the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, and also met some survivors of the Holocaust. He paid a visit to the Western Wall in the Old City of Jerusalem, one of the holiest sites in the world for Jews. It is a tradition when pilgrims pray at the wall to leave a prayer in one of its crevices. The Pope's prayer echoed the ceremony of repentance that had taken place a few days earlier in St. Peter's Basilica. The prayer in part said, "God of our fathers, we are deeply saddened by the behavior of those who in the course of history have caused these children of yours to suffer. And asking your forgiveness, we wish to commit ourselves to genuine brotherhood with the people of the covenant." No pope, as I said, has done more to further Jewish-Christian relations and understanding than Pope John Paul II. Nevertheless, there remain difficult issues between Jews and Christians. Here are but a few of them. The Good Friday prayer that Pope Benedict XVI approved in February 2008 for use in the so-called Tridentine Rite for the Good Friday liturgy. The prayer I am referring to is a reformulated and reinstituted prayer for the conversion of the Jews. This prayer is way out of step with Vatican II. The theology behind the prayer implies that Jews must convert to Christianity, recognize Jesus Christ as the Savior of mankind, and enter the Catholic Church so they can be saved. The great Jewish prophet, scholar, and rabbi, Abraham Joshua Heschel, often said that the only things Jews want is to be taken seriously as Jews, not as candidates for conversion. To do that requires a commitment on the part of Christians, Catholics and Protestants alike, to remember, to learn, and to change. For those who embrace the Tridentine Rite generally, and the Tridentine Good Friday liturgy specifically, do not speak for the worldwide church. The Pope does. They still have an influence on too many people and how they think about and relate to Jews and Judaism. Another issue to be dealt with concerns the Christian scriptures. As Mary Boyes, a Catholic scholar who has written extensively about Jewish-Christian relations, writes, and I'm quoting here, "For nearly 2 millennia, the church placed responsibility for the death of Jesus on the Jews, a charge that constituted the theological heart of its hostility to Judaism. The passion narratives of the canonical Gospels, as well as Luke's second account, the Acts of the Apostles, certainly attribute responsibility for the death of Jesus to the Jews, whether to the scribes, priests, and elders of the people, or in the fourth gospel, John's gospel, to the Jews." The end of quote. There has been tons of biblical scholarship since the end of the Holocaust in 1945, not to mention since the end of Vatican II in 1965, that can help priests and deacons prepare homilies so that the faithful do not come away from Mass on Sundays or weekdays thinking about how the Jews opposed Jesus. What we have to understand is that the Gospels are the outcome of long and complicated editorial work. Hence, it cannot be ruled out that some references hostile or less than favorable to the Jews have their historical conflicts between the nation church and the Jewish community. Certain controversies in the Gospels and in the Acts of the Apostles, for example, reflect Christian-Jewish relations long after the time of Jesus. To establish this is of capital importance if we wish to bring out the meaning of certain gospel texts for the Christians of today. Please do not misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that priests and deacons I often hear preaching at Sunday Mass or at weekday Masses are preaching anti-Jewish sermons. What I am suggesting is that most to whom I have had to listen often say nothing about the context of the scripture readings, thus leaving us hearers of the word only with the literal words read to us from the Christian scriptures. So, for example, we hear the Pharisees clashing with Jesus, castigating him for breaking the law by healing the sick on the Sabbath. Or we have the reading about the man born blind who is healed by Jesus in John's Gospel, chapter 9, on the Sabbath. Or we have the reading from John's Gospel about the man who had been ill for 38 years and could not get himself into the pool at Bethsaida, but who is cured by Jesus and tells the man to pick up his mat and walk. According to John's Gospel, this angers the Jews because it is the Sabbath and it is not lawful for anyone to carry a mat on the Sabbath. We see and hear the Pharisees clashing with Jesus because he eats with people who do not observe the Pharisees' pointless purity laws, pointless at least in the view of John's Gospel. Christians today should interpret the evangelists' accounts of the Pharisees not as historically accurate portraits of this Jewish movement, but as symbols of religiosity run awry, a phenomenon to which every religious tradition is vulnerable. The last difficult issue I would like to mention is that concerning Pope Pius XII. As Robert Ventresca, he's a Canadian Catholic historian who has written extensively about Pope Pius XII. As he says, much of the controversy about the role of the Catholic Church during the Holocaust hinges on how we judge historically and ethically Pope Pius XII's exercise of clerical power and religious leadership in a time of political extremism, war, and genocide. And more than any other dimension of his leadership, it is Pius XII's refusal to intervene directly, forcefully, and above all, publicly and persistently on behalf of persecuted Jews that has elicited the most intense and sustained debate. Pius XII was not mute about these matters, but he spoke about them from time to time, but his tone and style of speaking, as well as its content, remain vexing because they reveal and mask a kind of silence. How do we explain that silence? The Pope's unwillingness to speak out forcefully and publicly when Nazi squadrons in death camps murdered millions of Jews. Pope Francis, our current Pope and a good friend to the Jewish people, has opened the Vatican archives to scholars, and I am sure we shall soon have more essays and books written by scholars like Rob Ventresca, who will have much more to say about these issues. So I shall leave it to them to do so, only saying here that it is an important topic in terms of Jewish-Christian, especially Jewish-Catholic relations after the Holocaust. For the past 50 years plus, I have tried in my small way to be one of the scholars and teachers in the Catholic Church who has tried to stay faithful to Vatican II and to Pope John the 23rd's attempt to renew and refresh the teaching of our great and ancient Christian tradition, so that we Catholic Christians may more humbly, more willingly, and more lovingly reflect and make real in our lives the spirit and teaching of the Jewish Jesus. I have taken as my model in this effort Pope John the 23rd, an old man who was faithful to his church, yet unafraid to confront its past, a man who was unafraid to take history seriously and to learn from it, a man who was unafraid to engage in dialogue with his Jewish brothers and sisters, a man who was unafraid to change. I have tried to emulate Pope John Paul II, who opened new paths in theology and dialogue with our Jewish brothers and sisters. And today I have another model to follow, Pope Francis. In February 14, 2014, shortly after he became the Pope, he met a delegation of Jewish leaders at the Vatican, and he had this to say: in addition to interfaith dialogue, it is important to find ways in which Jews and Christians can cooperate in constructing a more just and fraternal world. It is my hope that the study of relations with Judaism may continue to flourish in seminaries and in centers of formation for lay Catholics, as I am similarly hopeful that a desire for an understanding of Christianity may grow among young rabbis and the Jewish community. We Christians and Jews both have something to learn in our efforts at dialogue about what drives us apart and what draws us together. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you about the Holocaust in Jewish-Christian relations.
Would anybody have any questions for Sister?
Or for each other.
Paula, go ahead. I'll ask you to
Okay.
unmute.
What can we do about the anti-Semitism that's happening again and raising its horrible head here in the country?
Well, of course, I think it's important for leaders, both religious leaders and political, even business leaders, nonprofit organization, foundation leaders, to speak up against it and to not avoid condemning anti-Semitism. And of course, education, education, education. We have to educate, our young people. We have to, I believe that we have to, I'll speak as a Roman Catholic Christian, in our churches on Sunday, we have to hear sermons about this and remind people, particularly Roman Catholic Christians, have to be reminded about Vatican II and about, what the church has tried to change and to preach in a more positive light. But I think it is incumbent upon newspapers, the media, religious, secular leaders to speak up, to not remain silent in their condemnation of anti-Semitism. Perhaps there are others who have some comments they want to make about what can we do about it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so it's the difficulty is the facts are the facts that are not going to change. We have to, we talk about diversity, we talk about difference and respecting people who are different. And I think that not necessarily, we aren't different people, but we have different views. And if only we could learn more, be taught more about really respecting people who are different from us, not intending to try to make them like us, but just respecting them. It would be good. It's a long haul, and I don't know if it will never touch everyone, but I think that there's some people who are be able to respect people who are different from them in their beliefs.
I would just like to say too, I read the book that Pope Francis and his friend Abraham Skorka wrote on heaven and faith. And I would encourage everybody to read it because I could not believe all the similarities. And I'm certainly not a theologian, but I was struck more by similarities than difference in the conversation between the Pope and the rabbi.
I agree with you. It's a great book. I read it, when it first was published in English after Francis was elected as the Pope. And it's a wonderful book. But again, it's about education. And, I can say I've not heard any priest at Sunday Mass or during the week reference the book and suggest that we read it. I mean, I think they're not reading it, but we have to, keep doing our best. But I agree with you about that book. And of course, there are other books and, in what I forget when the Pope Francis came to visit, but that came to visit the United States. But while he was in Philadelphia, he went to another Jesuit university, St. Joe's University, which has a center on Catholic Jewish relations, and blessed a sculpture called Synagoga and Ecclesia, I think, or something, the synagogue and the church, which is a kind of renewed artistic image, if I could put it that way, of the church and the synagogue. Traditionally, the church was always in sculptures shown as being the person without the blindfold, and the synagogue was shown with the blindfold. This sculpture at St. Joe's University shows them both without a blindfold, in dialogue, learning. I also think our interreligious dialogue, except at the very highest levels, we don't do very much of it these days.
Yeah.
I mean, how frequently is a rabbi being invited to come and perhaps at some point give the sermon on a Sunday, or how often is a priest or a minister in the Protestant church being invited to a synagogue to lecture? It's not, we've got to get back to that and encourage more of it.
Tell me, Carol, does the church have problems with Muslims?
Well,
Not
when
to
you say
change the
problems
subject.
with them, I would say the Catholic Church probably, I think you could say the Christian churches came out of Judaism. So it feels a great affinity with Judaism. I suppose it depends, which kind of Islam you're speaking about. If you're speaking about radical Islamic fundamentalism, I think we all have a problem with that. But there is much more dialogue between Catholics and Muslims than there has been in the past, and more encouraged. I mean, the Pope himself went to Egypt and met with the head of one of the most prominent, well-known centers of Islam. So there is encouragement, but when you say, does it have a problem? I don't know how you define problem, or exactly what you mean by a problem.
Well, anti-Semitism is a problem. So is there any anti-Islam? It's a problem.
I'm sure there is among people, but it's different in the sense that on Sunday, I don't read about some imam being in opposition to Jesus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are now.
Yeah, Sister Carol.
Yeah, Allison?
There you go. Sister Carol, Sandra, can you hear me? This is Jim Reed.
I can hear you.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, Carol, how are you? Sister Carol.
Good.
Hey, you and I, when we had dinner at Sandra Moore's the other night, we were blanking on the name of an American that helped save Jewish and anti-Nazi refugees in Marseille during the war. Varian Fry.
Varian Fry, right.
Was
I think he's the only American, I better don't hold me to this, but he is one of the only Americans honored by Yad Vashem, I believe, as a righteous among the nations.
Yeah, I think he was one of the first 5. That's right.
Right, right.
Sandra, there's a great book, and somebody who you might think about for the Schemel Forum is a Princeton professor named Jeremy Adelman, who wrote a book about Alberto Hirschman called Worldly Philosopher, and he was also involved with Varian Fry,
Right.
Hiram Bingham IV in Marseille. But just down the road in Princeton, it's a terrific book, 700 pages, but I never plow through those books of that length, but I got through that one, and it's a great story. Yes, Sister Carol, wonderful talk. Karen and I both enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Allison?
Yep, Maury, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Sister Carol.
I said, who will ask me the hardest question? Maury Myers.
Here, let me get back to the Holocaust, but first let me say, I've known you as long as Sandra, and your service in interfaith improvement is extraordinary. A few more
Thank
of
you.
you, and the problem would be solved. My question is this: Adolf Hitler, born a Catholic, and I believe died a Catholic. Was there any effort by the church to excommunicate him? And if not, why wasn't there?
Well, it's true. He was born a Catholic. He was born, baptized as a Catholic. As I understand it, he paid the church tax in Germany, designated to the Catholic Church, even until he died. Why was there no effort to excommunicate him? I can't really answer that, except he probably had connections in the Vatican, and I'm sure it's a complicated political issue. Excommunicate the head of Germany in a country where Catholics and Protestants are about evenly divided, and you risk alienating a large part of the Catholic faithful in that country. I mean, of course, I think it's terrible. My understanding is that in Ireland, for example, even like right after Hitler committed suicide, there was a book of condolences in Dublin for the people to sign to send to Germany. This is right at the end of World War II. And there had been masses offered for the repose of the soul of Adolf Hitler. I mean, of course, I think it's horrible, but why do they do it? Perhaps there are others who can comment more about that, but I mean, I just think
I have a comment. First of all, sister, I would like to thank you immensely for your scholarship, your excellent work, your preparation, and your delivery. It was very moving for me.
Thank you.
I would add that I only wish as a longtime Episcopalian now, that there were more women in positions of power in the Catholic Church, and we may see perhaps a change quicker. Just very parenthetically, I would say that an excommunication of somebody, again, reinforces, in my opinion, the exclusivity of that organization. They're not good enough, we have to throw them out. So I don't know if I agree with excommunication. Anyway, I wanted to just say that I grew up outside of Pittsburgh in a small steel town, and I was in a K-8 Irish Catholic school in the late 50s, staffed by the Sisters of Mercy.
Oh,
Many of whom I remember.
probably from Pittsburgh.
Absolutely, absolutely. The mother house was in Pittsburgh, and I remember grade by grade their names. Now, I will tell you, it was actually much worse in those days than you have portrayed. It was far broader than just the Jews. Not only did we receive the message that the only people in the church were going to be saved, but in those days, you may remember that in towns outside of Pittsburgh, there were many, many Roman Catholic churches. There was the Irish Catholic Church, the Polish, the German, the Italian. And I remember my grandmother saying on many occasions, "You have not heard Mass if you go to the Italian Catholic Church. You have only heard Mass if you go to the Irish Catholic Church." That's how difficult.
Narrow and exclusive.
Exactly.
Right.
And every Friday afternoon at this Catholic Irish school, we always had to move all of our things from our desk into what we called the robbery in those days, where we hung up our clothes and locked them up because the public school kids were coming in for catechism.
Oh, right.
So cast aspersions on those who didn't even go to a Catholic school, let alone an Irish Catholic school. So I consider myself lucky because I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. All of my playmates were Jewish. So I knew as a little boy that the nuns were wrong about what they were teaching. And I suppose that I was lucky. I'll bet you if I went back into that small community today and met people my age who never left, they would have many of the same similar ideas that I was that was part of my growing up that I didn't accept. So I applaud you again for your excellent scholarship, and I just hope and pray that soon women will be, someone in the future will be talking about women rather than just man pope after man pope after man pope.
Well, thank you. I agree with you. And let me just to compliment your comment about you grew up in a Jewish neighborhood and that's how you knew this thing about outside the church, no salvation. My mother was Catholic, my father was Protestant. So I knew there had to be something
right
wrong about, it's like, this can't be right. So yours had to do with Jews, mine had to do with my father was Protestant. So I always feel that a certain amount of skepticism is always very helpful.
Did they argue?
No, we were raised Catholic, and my father would come to Mass like for first communions, confirmation, marriages, funerals. That was it. The rest of it, and he would stand in the back and with his arms crossed. And of course, he never heard any good sermons. So, but my father remained, well, he never became a Catholic, let me put it that way. So, but he was a good man. And I knew there was something the matter with this outside the church. There is no salvation.
I have a question. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I too want to thank you for your scholarship and your research and your presentation. And I agree that it takes leadership in order to try to point people in the right direction. But there's also resistance to leadership and to change. I mean, there's still people that oppose the Latin Mass. or want the Latin Mass opposed
Yeah,
to
the
regular Mass.
Tridentine.
And there are
Right.
people now who take issue with the Pope's positions on gays, for instance. And a lot of this, I think, is political more than religious. But to what
Agreed.
extent is there still remnants of anti-Semitism or resistance to the liberalization of the Catholic Church from above, in terms of either clergy or congregants? Do you see any of that, or do you know of any of that?
Well, I would say officially, the church, from the Pope to archbishops to are not, well, I would say they agree with the official teaching of the church. Are there priests or maybe even some bishops who would be anti-Semitic? I'm sure there are. And I don't know them. I can't name them, except for people like the Tridentine, the Society of St. Pius X, for example. But the Society of St. Pius X that the Holy See, the bishops, the Pope has been from, I think even John Paul II, Benedict XV, and I just read recently, even Francis himself have tried to get reconciled. They absolutely do not accept the teachings of Vatican II, and they are considered in schism from the church. So, they identify themselves as Catholics, but they are not in, I want to say they are not in union with the Pope and the Vatican. Are there individuals? I'm sure there are individuals. I mean, and when you said it's more political than anything, I mean, all we have to do is look at what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, a few years ago, and some of these people who are now on trial, or on January the 6th of 2021, when we saw T-shirts and signs, of anti-Semitism. But I could not say to you, except for the Society of St. Pius X, founded by Marcel Lefebvre, who was an archbishop who was at Vatican Council II, but absolutely refused to accept the documents that came out of Vatican II, including the document Nostra Aetate. He has since died, but he because he was in the Catholic tradition, a validly ordained bishop, he ordained bishops, but they are not in union with Rome.
So you would say now, I mean, the law or the principles that are come forward are against anti-Semitism.
I would say that.
You would
Generally
not.
speaking, do I think that there are exceptions to that in some people?
Yeah.
Yes, I do, but I can't, I can't say, oh, Bishop so-and-so in the diocese of.
Sure. I don't mean that, but just that the word is out,
Right.
as it were, that anti-Semitism is not acceptable.
Correct.
I understand that everyone isn't faithful to that, but
Right.
but that's important.
Right.
Nancy, did you have a question?
I do have a question. Thank you very much for your presentation, sister.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What do you know what they are teaching in the seminaries now about interpreting the scriptures, let's say of John and Acts, where it puts the Jewish people in a negative light?
Well, I would say that if it's a good seminary, meaning, with excellent teachers and scholars, they are teaching in the Roman Catholic tradition They are teaching the latest in biblical scholarship. The problem is, how much does all of this kind of filter down to the pews? I mean,
The neighborhood.
and I think they're the places like, say, Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, Maryland, or St. Mary's in Baltimore. Places like the Immaculate Conception on Long Island. These are 3 seminaries that come to mind. I think they're teaching the latest in biblical scholarship, but it's like anything else. You have to keep studying, keep ahead of things. You know, I don't want to say that your run-of-the-mill parish priest in a local parish is uninformed or even, God forbid, stupid, but I think they're overworked. I think few of them had the time to keep up with things. And I think it's a challenge to take the time every day. I mean, those of you who are Catholic and maybe perhaps members of parishes in this area or other, I was just talking to a priest who's now the pastor of three parishes. Just, you know, DuPont, Dorrier, Archibald, whatever the Old Forge, you know. That it used to be that in parishes you had the pastor and at least one or more assistants. And these guys, you know, they have to do it all. I mean, so I think it's hard, but I would say, I think I can make the general statement that the best of Catholic biblical scholarship is being taught in seminary, in Catholic seminaries. But how much of that, if I could say, you know, remains after, I have to say after a man is ordained, that is another issue. How much they keep up, another issue.
Thank you, sister.
Are you in
Libby.
favor of women being ordained as priests?
Oh, I see no reason why they cannot be ordained as priests. If you'll forgive me, I call it, you know, it's like sexual theology. A woman is missing a particular organ, and so she's not ordained. It's, of course, I think women can be ordained.
Libby, go ahead.
I just wanted to, when you were talking about the Good Friday services, and I don't think, I mean, it seems to me that it's only recently that those 10 prayers have been changed so they don't make you cringe when you're praying for.
It's actually, they were changed in the late 1960s, early 1970s. It was,
they were still bad.
No, I disagree with you. In 1958, I believe it was, right after he became Pope, John the 23rd removed the words perfidious Jews from the Good Friday prayers. And the Tridentine rite, which is the rite that the Society of St. Pius X and those who are in favor of the Latin, keeping the Latin Mass and have the Good Friday services in Latin, they are the ones who use this, who took a step backwards. But the official translation, I forget if it's the Roman Missal of 1978, don't hold me to the date. The official translation changed the wording of the prayers. I still don't like them.
No,
And in fact,
that's what I'm saying.
I'll admit to you that I don't go to Good Friday services.
Mary Karen, you have your hand up?
You have to undo your.
Yeah,
There you go.
got it. This is my, it's when we were starting to talk about conversations about how Christians and Jewish members of the Jewish community can meet and understand one another in a different way. The story I want to tell is that my brother was married for 30 years to a Jewish woman who has since died. And when she and my brother married, he's a little Catholic boy, she's a little Jewish girl from New York, he's a little Catholic boy from Kentucky. Neither set of parents understood that marriage or the choice of their children to choose that particular spouse. So my mother went to the Diocese of Louisville, in the Archdiocese of Louisville in Kentucky, and asked the question, what can I do? She was upset, I think at the time. And the ecumenical officer just said to her, your son has chosen to marry and has chosen, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that. It seems to me that your better choice is to understand your going to be future daughter-in-law, and recommended that she join a Catholic Jewish dialogue group, which she belonged to for 30 years. And actually she's been dead 18 years, so it was a long time ago. She went to and when she died, and we're at this Roman Catholic wake, the members of many of the Jewish members of that group were at that wake service for my mother, because they had spent 20 years learning to know one another. And I think why I want to say that is it's always a reminder to me to just step out of the box I'm in and look for places to try to meet and understand people who aren't identical to me. And it also used to go off as a bell in my head when I was trying to lead United Ministry at Harvard, and it was 40 religious professionals from 30 religious groups. We had to pay attention to one another. We had to learn to listen to each other, and we had to learn to respect the convictions and beliefs and practices of people who weren't us. But you kind of got, I don't want to say shoved into it, but my mother, she got pushed into a place that she wouldn't have chosen necessarily to go because she loved her child.
Right.
And
I think that is an absolutely beautiful story. And I think it also says something about the fact that not only do Christians, Catholic Christians, Protestant Christians have to, I'll use the term have to, or should want to, learn about Jews and Judaism, but Jews need to learn about Christians. We have to learn about more than the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. And to see, again, I would be the last person to say that we Roman Catholic Christians are totally open and receptive and respectful of Jews and Judaism, but we've made great strides, and many of us are trying and doing our best to be accepting and to learn and to change whatever attitudes we may have had, to, if I could say, to update. I'm not sure that's always true in terms of the Jewish community toward Christians. So that's why I said at the end of my little talk, we both have something to learn.
Yeah.
And we both need to work at it.
well, and I also, yes, so. The other thing I wanted to say over the course of that many years of the two families relating to each other is that Megan was my sister-in-law. Her family had come here, the ones who survived, because they were running away from a pogrom in Russia perpetrated by Christians.
Right.
And so the fact that their granddaughter, because it was her grandparents, that their granddaughter would marry a Christian man was It was
Yeah.
traumatic for both families, to be honest about it. It was not what either family would have chosen or expected.
Right.
What sort of smoothed that over a little bit is that her grandparents in New York remembered that when the flu came through, the people who came into the tenements and carried the sick folks out, regardless of their religious affiliation or nationality, were nursing nuns who carried them to their hospitals. And so it was kind of like if some people who were Christian or Catholic could behave in this way to people who needed help, maybe there's a way that we can learn to trust, if not the whole religion, at least you all or each other. And so it was really very much in my family, trusting individual people that got your mind to be open to learning more about the whole tradition.
Thank you. That's really beautiful.
I think that, getting to know people, I mean, I think you're lucky if you live in a neighborhood where has people in it who are different from you. I think that something happens, can happen, that can't be replaced really by living only with people of your own faith or ethic. We're have been known in our best of days to be diverse, and everyone is welcome. And I think that that is part of, that should be part of who we are as Americans. It doesn't work always, but for, I think, my father's family that came from Hungary, he, like when I went to school in Old Forge, was always the only Jewish kid in my class, but people were used to it. And who was my best friend? It was somebody who was my friend, who lived near me. And it's getting to know people. I won't sing that song, I promise. Any other questions or comments?
I just have a comment. Scranton is a very unusual community because you do have a yeshiva there. You do have a very strong Jewish population there. I love the idea that Mary suggested, and had her family had the wonderful experience of dialogue with the Jewish community. And I know in both the Protestant and Catholic, priests and ministers often share that ecumenical dialogue. But for those of us who are lay people, how exciting would it be to have the ability to participate in something like that? And Carol, if you could get something like that started, I would be the first to sign up for it.
Well, maybe
Carol, we
I'll
could
ask her to
put
help.
something together.
Hey, Carol,
Yes.
okay, let me give you an easy one now. Easy question. This afternoon, the College of Cardinals announced that they have selected as the Pope Sister Carol Rittner.
Oh.
What would you do as your first act to improve Catholic-Jewish relations?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. What would but Maury, let me be honest and say I really would have to think about that, but that is a wonderful question. What would be the first thing I would do? I'd invite you and Sandra for dinner.
Accepted.
No, truly, no, really, when I know I'm not answering your question, Maury, but it's a wonderful what if question. But I want to say that Sandra and Maury Myers, in my view, are two people who exemplify reaching out to people who are different. I have met so many people through Sandra and Maury at their home or in other places who are different. They're not necessarily Jewish. They're not Catholic. I mean, you know, they're not necessarily white.
Are they Schemel?
And I've even met, I think I've even met a Republican or two through, yeah. But I mean, really, they exemplify. And when you were speaking there for a moment, Sandra, or whoever was speaking right before you, I was thinking about your father. And I hope I have this story right, but you know, he was a poor boy who came, and the Jesuits gave him a chance by giving him a scholarship to what was St. Thomas College at the time.
Yeah.
And
They
now
weren't Jesuits, but they were priests, yeah.
they were
They
priests.
did.
Okay, it was a Catholic
Yeah.
school.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and Mr. Gelb
That's good.
never forgot that. You know, we can't forget the good things that happen and that people do. And, you know, I often think of that, or I think of down here in the Wilkes-Barre area. I'm on the board at Misericordia, and some of you may know the name Attorney Harold Rosen Jenkins Greenwald law firm. And Harold's wife, Sally Ann, of blessed memory, she died about 2 months ago. She was given a scholarship by the Sisters of Mercy at Misericordia. I think in the last 2 years of her school, she started at what had been Bucknell in Wilkes-Barre, which is now, I think, Wilkes College. Anyhow, she was given a scholarship. They never forgot that. And Harold and Sally Ann were extremely generous in supporting Misericordia in many ways. I mean, financially, helping to make friends, speaking positively. So we need to remember also the good things, the good relations between Jews and Christians, as well as we can't forget the terrible history of terrible relations, but we have to remember the good ones as well.
Yeah. I'm sure that most of us have some good memories to share because it's, I think that we can do it, and I think we do it. I think we can appreciate the other, whoever that other is, and work at it.
I have a question. It's more like a personal question. Have you ever met Patrick Dubois?
I
the
did
French
meet him.
priest? You did?
I only met him in if I could say, a professional capacity. He spoke at Seton Hill, not Seton Hall, Seton Hill University out in Western Pennsylvania. He spoke about the work that he has done, and I met him there, but my French is not so good and his English is not so good, but I'm a great admirer of the work that he does. And in fact, I edited for a book that I published, a presentation that he gave that's included in the book.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, Carol, I think you've given us food for thought, and you know that we like, that's what we like at the Schemel Forum, and you more than satisfied everything that we are.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very, very much, Sandra. And to all of you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.